Hello everyone, Alex here today, and as you can see, I'm in nullsec. I went through a wormhole and I came out of a system that was very surprising to me. I was right next door to a system that was very significant to me. I came out in ZXIC, and right next door is KDF-GY. Why is this significant for me? Because for quite a while, this was my home in 0.0. My very first major alliance in nullsec was the Interstellar Starbase Syndicate, and specifically the corporation, the ISS Navy, which was the protectorate of the Interstellar Starbase Syndicate. Well, what was the Interstellar Starbase Syndicate, you may ask? Well, for old veterans, you probably remember what that was. It was a very significant alliance that even made real world news. What the concept of the ISS was that at the time when Eve was still essentially pretty new, outposts, particularly player-owned stations, the big ones, not the control towers, but the actual very large stations, were introduced into the game that player alliances could build, and they would have a full station with all the functionality that you could have, and the same type of station that you could have in high sec or low sec that the NPCs had. But the cost and the logistics of operating these stations was absolutely enormous, and only the major power players could deploy one. And at the time, I believe this was 2005, there were only a handful of stations in 0.0. Like, we're talking like maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6. Enter the ISS. Now, the concept of the ISS is right out of an MBA textbook. It was the first truly publicly funded alliance that deployed an outpost in 0.0 and developed the whole Freeport concept that many of us now take for granted. And what station was that? It was this one. This was the very first publicly funded outpost ever developed and deployed in nullsec. This was ISS Marginis. In fact, if you even pull up the description of this type of citadel, it is called the Marginis class upgraded Fortizar in honor of the ISS Marginis. It was a Galente starbase that was the first Freeport starbase where if you could get there, you could dock. And the adventurous, the foolhardy, you name it, could go there. ISS held a very strict neutrality policy. They didn't take part in any conflict. They didn't take part in any side. They were strictly neutral. They had their investors, they had their backers, they had a small military force, which I was a part of in the ISS Navy, and they had the guarantee and support of the major powers that they would not interfere with ISS neutrality. Some believed it, some didn't. But for a surprisingly long period of time, surprisingly long period in EVE terms at least, the concept of a publicly funded, non-aligned 0.0 alliance that operated these Freeport stations was accepted. But even back then, there was an enormous amount of controversy because ISS, in the eyes of some, actually more than some, kind of poisoned the well a little bit. And here's the reason why. I'm going to open up the map again a little bit here. While ISS had deployed their non-aligned Freeport starbases, for example, here in KDF and next door in ZXIC, which was an Amar factory station, that way you could build your ships and your items and you could sell them on the market in the catch region. There was another one up in, where was it exactly? I believe it was in the Pure Blind region. It was called Borealis. It was up there. There was another 2 deployed in catch on the north side near the Providence. But with all these stations out there, there was a deal that was made between ISS and another alliance at the time called Locta Volterra that made their home down here just to the south in the Tenerife region and a little bit into Deuteroid. They were one of the major powers at that time. This was before Goonswarm. This was before the Imperium, long before them. Red Alliance was around at that time. But the deal was this. ISS would deploy a station inside Locta Volterra space. It would be a closed station where ISS and Locta Volterra could use it, and ISS would get a cut of the profits. Essentially, it was a quasi-Freeport station, but not really. And was seen as kind of a plum deal between Locta Volterra and the Interstellar Starbase Syndicate. This, for more than a few people, and several people in high positions in several of the Alliance, even some of our benefactors, really cast into doubt ISS' true neutrality inside EVE Online. Was ISS truly neutral, or did they pony up to Locta Volterra and their allies? And already, ISS was seen as being biased, if not in league, with Locta Volterra and their allies, who were at war with, at the time, I believe, the Red Alliance, which was a Russian alliance at the time. Things just started to cascade at that point. Goonswarm had just arrived. They came from some of the awful forums. They established themselves, and they allied with Red Alliance, and they wanted to go to war against Bob, Band of Brothers. Fast forward for about a 8 or 9 month period, and a major offensive was launched, with the first step being the capture of the ISS non-aligned stations, as they were seen to be, 1, easy targets, 2, several were in strategic regions or strategic spots that could reach across the sector or towards the enemy. And I think just some people just saw them as just easy pickings, basically, as the first step in a larger war between Goonswarm, Red Alliance, and the Band of Brothers, who had recently, at that time, just defeated Ascendant Frontier, which was the largest alliance in EVE Online at the time, and had deployed the first station, and had created the first Titan, and had lost the first Titan. So the story of ISS and this very first station, KDF-GY, is special to me because this was where my first truly large fleet flights occurred between ISS, IAC, the Interstellar Alcohol Conglomerate, if some of you remember them, and then the launching the offensive and the Great Southern War between Band of Brothers and Goonswarm, Red Alliance, and their allies. Of course, we lost ISS Marginis. There was a big appeal to the investors, try and come up with some mitigation plan on the business side. And we had real MBAs running the alliance. I mean, they took their real life skills in business and applied it in this virtual world. It was incredible. But the damage was done. I was there when the assault began. And true to form for Goonswarm, they had a spy inside the ISS Navy. This spy had taken out all the fuel of the control towers that was holding sovereignty in F4, ZXIC, and KDF-GY. If the sovereignty towers went down, the stations could be captured essentially without a fight. We caught them in the act, quite literally, and it was almost pure blind luck. The ISS Navy was essentially all based in Europe, and I was just brought on board a few months prior as the Vice Admiral of Logistics, and I was essentially the only one in the American time zone that had director level rights in the ISS Navy, and I had just gotten them. And a friend of mine named Crane White Lightning told me what was going on, and the towers were shutting down. And Jacob Majestic, who was the traitor, had left a note inside each tower to make sure we knew who it was. He did a little too early, however. I revoked his rights, and we stopped him while he was defueling the towers in ZXIC, the system which I'm in now, which is right next door. We lost F4R immediately. That was the first system that he had deactivated. But we stopped him, and we held on to ZXIC and KDF. And at that point, the Goon Swarm had no choice but to launch a full offensive to get the stations at Marginis, KDF-GY, and I believe it was called Fabrica here in ZXIC. We had capital ships, we had carriers, we had developed a mutual defense agreement with another alliance here, which I'll talk about later, named Ushur Khan, which was actually a Minmatar role-playing alliance at war with the Amar role-playing alliance named CVA, and we were essentially the only allies with each other. And we actually had a very handful of operations that succeeded, and actually one of them was to get our freighters out. They were trapped inside KDF, and I had coordinated a joint attack on, frankly, low activity hours with a large battleship fleet leaving from 9UI, which I'll see here just shortly, to make a breakout of our freighters, and we succeeded. We actually got the freighters out, and we got them back into Alliance space. So at least their freighters were safe. And at the time, the freighter was a very big investment that had been put at risk because they were trapped inside ISS Marginis. So actually, let me go up here and type in 9UI. And there's a reason I want to go up here, but I'll share what that reason is in a little bit later, in a little bit separate video. I do want to stop there and take a look. So anyways, this is me reminiscing. This is the story of ISS. This was my story. You saw the very first station as it was launched. In EVE Online, it was the very first Freeport station, and it's still there. It's now Papa's John's Pizza, as they call it. And I'm sure it will change its name again. It's changed its name many, many times. It's changed owners many, many times. It will do so again if it doesn't get blown up. I hope it doesn't. I really would like to see just that one outpost, the original, stay there. But again, with the new mechanics of Citadels, it will one day meet its fate. And that'd be a sad day, because for quite a while, in my younger years in playing EVE Online, that was where we built everything. That is where I got my first real taste of 0.0. 0.0 alliances, 0.0 operations, the politics, the large-scale fleet fights, really what makes EVE special. And that is something I will always remember. That is something that can never be replaced. And I feel really honored that I was able to participate at that time. And it's something that's sadly been a little bit lost, but you never know. Maybe it'll come back. As I mentioned, I think maybe the spiritual successor, as I said in the video, talk about N-6, is the Capitalist Army. And I think they're taking that same concept. And that's a wonderful thing to see. So anyways, enough reminiscing from old man Alex here. I hope you enjoyed the video. A little bit of a history lesson about ISS, about the first station Marginis at KDF-GY. You may want to do what I did, grab a covert op ships if you want to just stop by and take a look. It is there. You won't be able to dock, of course, but history is still there, and it's part of my history. It's part of the people that was at EVE at the time. Many of them are no longer in the game, but it's those shared memories that make everything special. So take care, guys. Make your own memories, make your own story. That's the wonderful thing about EVE. It's not like World of Warcraft or something else where the story is set. You make your own story, and it's far better and far greater than any kind of sandbox or theme park MMORPG that can give you. Yeah, some sandboxes are pretty good, but nothing to the scale of EVE Online. So take care, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Stay tuned, and I'll catch you next time.